Well, like the title says, moment of truth. So yesterday, if you were watching, I had a live video and I was laying up this landing gear. So I don't know, it won't be long today. I'm going to go ahead and open this mold here and see what we got. So here we go. I had this in the little warming box overnight. It's about a 95 degrees. Keep forgetting to turn that volume down. So this landing gear, this was the landing gear for a control line airplane. Hopefully you can see it okay. I'll do this down here on the floor. Once you get all these clamps on this mold, it gets pretty heavy, so this way I keep it off my glass workbench. Maybe later this spring I'll set up another bench, move some stuff around in the garage, and I'll have a table just for composites. That's the plan anyway. Okay, so let me set this back up on the bench, or I don't know, maybe I'll go ahead and open it down here. So to do that, let me get something to tap the mold apart. The way these molds are set up, I can actually tap on these ears here. Take these little plates off the side first. These are little aluminum plates. And the neat thing about, you know, this composite stuff, I mean, obviously if you're trying to sell it or whatever, you want them to look nice, but if this had some pinholes or something in it, you can still use it. Personally, I mean, just fill them up, and you can hear the tone change when you start tapping on it. So right off the bat, I don't see any pinholes or anything. Looks pretty good. So let's set this on the bench, and then I'll go ahead and continue filming it. All right, so first thing I do is I grab it down here at the vertical end and sort of see if I can pry that out. It might be one of these things where sometimes they fall out, sometimes you have to work them out a little bit. So there's a little washout like right in here, but if you remember yesterday when I actually molded this up, I tried to keep the carbon poked down in the mold. And what you're looking at here is PVA. That'll be washed off. I had a matte finish to it. Some people paint these things, some people just leave them black. So let's take some Windex, we'll wash off some of that PVA. I'll show you the finish. And then I just take some scissors and I'll cut some of this stuff off around the edge. Come around here. As long as there's no washout with carbon, it cuts pretty easy. When you hit some of the carbon, it gets a little tougher. Alright. Normally I take them inside and run them in the sink, but we'll just do this real quick. I'll show you what the matte finish looks like. This is a pretty good coat of PVA in there. If you're ever spraying the inside of a mold with PVA and you mess it up or it's not laying down flat, just re-wax it and spray it. So that's the final finish. I mean, with the PVA cleared off. And it's I don't know, maybe a semi-gloss, or sort of see it there. So let's see what this weighs. It's still got a little flashing on it. So on here, okay, 34 grams, so it's just a little over 2 ounces, so I might be able to get a couple grams off of it here. So, better than aluminum, but still, I'm going to perfect it a little bit more. Might be able to take some more weight out of it. Now this is pretty rigid. And then to clean up the mold, I just go through there and take a dull razor, like I've said before, scrape the sides. Now the inside of the mold, you know, check it. It's really clean. And this mold here, this has been used quite a bit. It's not a brand new mold. You can see here on this mold, this different color a lighter color here and a darker color. The reason why you're seeing that is because this is the surface coat here. So I brush the surface coat over the plug, the master part, and it's really it's a finer finish. And then I actually backfilled it with the casting resin. And with this mold, like all of them except for the bell crank, I've actually scribed some lines here, so when I close it I always make sure that lines up. Sometimes it's easy on a prop mold or a landing gear mold to get the misalignment and have it on backwards. So that cleans off pretty good. That's just wax. There'll be some PVA left in there. PVA, it takes a little bit longer, but by using it you pretty much guarantee you'll be able to release. One of the things that became a consideration when I started making parts high temp is the PVA. I can't remember what the exact specs are, but if you get over 125 degrees, the PVA starts to melt a little bit or get soft in the mold. So if you want to make a high temp part with the PVA process, you're sort of limited. Now, I found some stuff, and I'm not sure who had it. Let me get it down here. I got it on the shelf. Let's see, this stuff here, part all, cover all film. This stuff, I never used much of it, but this was supposed to be a higher temp PVA. Let's see here. Instead of being the normal green, this was it's sort of a purple. Let's see. Okay. It says right here you can use this on room temp to 300 degrees. So if you didn't want to go the free coat route, which was like an aerosol release, you can use this stuff. It looks like I bought this from CST. I don't know if they're still in business or not. But high temp PVA, and then this is the just the ease release. This was an older jug here, of course, but this is just the regular PVA, the green stuff. So this is about to 125 degrees. This will get you to 300 with the same process. Now, free coat, or I've got it sitting around here somewhere. This stuff here, this is an excellent release for metal molds. You can put this on plastic, and sometimes I'll take a whole bunch of these and line them up, and I'll just spray them all at once. And you can use this stuff on molds too. But like I said previously, if you use this as a release and you put epoxy against a green mold, you can still get some cross-linking. You still might run into trouble, but this is excellent for high temp molds, well-seasoned mold, and it's good for metal parts. Let's just say these clamps down here. I'll go ahead and spray the clamps with this stuff. That way the runoff epoxy comes off nice and easy. Now another thing, if you have all your fabric or carbon fiber or whatever you got laying out, make sure that you're not spraying the mold release in the same proximity. You can wax in the right next to it, but you don't want any overspray to get on your carbon or glass. So keep that in mind if you go that route. Okay, so that's pretty much a demold, and a little advice on this stuff. It really doesn't say PVA. It's a different mix. It says something here about Rexco. It says important notice: Rexcore and or its dealer distributors make no warranties, express or implied. So you might have to do a little research if you wanted to use this. Part-all coverall film by Rexco, up to 300 degrees. And here it says you can spray it 60 to 90 degrees PSI at the gun, so that's about what I was doing. It should atomize prior to contact with the mold. It says do not dilute. You can brush it or spray it. Not for use with resins containing water or giving off water during cure. Example, phenolics. Do not use on automotive finishes as damage may occur. It's still water-based. Okay, so that's a little tidbit there. A couple other things I want to go over. I won't be on too long here. I always get timed out at about an hour anyway. I made this little miter box, and sort of an impromptu thing on a job site once. We were doing some cabinet trim, and this little miter box was real simple. It takes a miter saw to make it, so if you don't have a chop saw or a miter saw, you know, the electrical, like a DeWalt, you know, it's pretty hard to get these angles right. So what I did is I took a piece of plywood, this is 3/4 inch, and I made 2 of them. So one of them I cut up, so I stood it on end and I cut it at 45, cut it at 90, a 90, and a 45. So in effect, once I go around the back side, which I haven't done yet, what I'm going to do is drill holes and make them a little oblong and put screws in there. So once I get these things where they're screwed onto the back and I can slide them back and forth like this, I'll find the saw that I want to use. And these are 2 saws. Here's your old Zona saws. I mean, so that's pretty common. This saw here, I've been using these. These are unbelievably sharp and good. And one of the main features of this saw, it might not be apparent when you first look at this packaging, it cuts on the pull stroke. So this Zona saw, it looks like it's, I don't know, it's hard to tell. It'll probably cut on the pull and also the push. But this saw here is designed to where it cuts on the pull. And by cutting on the pull stroke, it guarantees the blade won't buckle. And as far as the thickness, this blade is probably the same thickness as the Zona saw. Might be just the same or just a hair thinner. Okay, to set this miter saw up, or the miter box, what I do is I set the saw in there and I just rest it, and then I'll tighten these screws down while it's pinching the blade just very slightly. So that way you've got a little friction to hold the saw vertical, but it'll still slide. And the other nice thing, there's not much kerf on this. There's not much kerf on this either, really. And after a while, let's just say that this becomes wore out or a little too sloppy, you can slide the blocks in a little bit tighter, or you can just cut new blocks, or just take this block off and just put another edge on it. So you got a 45 to the left, 45 to the right, and a 90. And you can make these blocks any degree you want. But I thought it was a quick way to make a miter box out of scrap. Thing you got to remember though, if you're making this box to cut with a Zona, the vertical arm here, you've got to make sure that this top, the top spine of this blade doesn't bottom out here. And this one would, so this would have to be a little bit shorter to use with this blade. This blade here, it's thicker, so yeah, this is the one I was going to use on this box. So if you do a lot of stick building, there's a quick way to do it. And obviously it's nothing new. Miter boxes have been around forever, but this was next to nothing in scrap. And also I liked the fact that you can adjust it back and forth to get the tension you want. And obviously you can, if you had anything other than 45 and 90 you wanted to cut with, you could, you can incorporate those blocks in there. So that's something that might be useful. There's something else I wanted to talk about. Can't remember what it was. The main thing was today is just to open this mold. I just wanted you to see the part come out. So I'm happy with it. It looks like a good part. Get it all cleaned up and get the flash off. What I'll do on some of this flash, I'll take a file, or you can use a sanding block, but sometimes I like working with files. I'll just go down there and just peel the flash off. I think by using a file you get a little bit more control sometimes. And then also, if you have a little washout, you can usually peel that off. It'll cut through that, just like that. One of the things, the reason why I went through the trouble on this mold to actually make it 2 parts is to get this airfoil in here. I wanted a teardrop shape because I wanted the rigidity. Anytime you take something that's flat, it's alright, but as soon as you take something that's flat and you push it together to where it's more of a teardrop shape, you get more rigidity for the same amount of carbon. And that's why I went with this teardrop. Plus it looks better. So a lot of molds, what they were doing, it was just a flat mold and they lay the carbon fiber cloth over the long mold and they just cut it in strips. They'll just go through there and slice them out of one big form. The trouble with that is on some of them, not all of them, but I've seen some of them that they started to delam right in this area here. And the other thing, I think you could end up with a lighter gear that looked better, was more rigid going with this method. So that's why I came up with this 2-part mold. And when I was going through the scenario of how to make this mold, I was talking to, I don't know, 3 or 4 modelers that were giving me their input on what they thought would work the best, and this is what I decided on and came up with. So some of the other stuff I've got, I laid up yesterday. I had another 4 of these things, plus I've got 5 more molds that I'm going to lay up today probably. And yesterday, if you remember, I think it was yesterday, I was over there with a hammer or the pliers trying to beat the mold open. So let's see real quick how this one comes out. Yeah, I had one, I forgot to wax the plate. That's the way you like them to come out. Pretty easy. There we go. It came out nice. It looks good. When you start making stuff, you get to the point where it's a lot of fun, and after a while, you start doing a lot of it, and then it gets monotonous, and then you're ready to move on to doing some balsa stuff or something different. It's one of the things I enjoyed about this hobby. About the time you get bored with one process, you're ready to move on to another. A lot of times I just hold this against my gut. That way it's not beating up the actual part. So what's holding this bell crank on this plastic? What happens, a little bit of the sticking, right in here, that resin goes through these holes and wicks up in there. So even though you get a pretty good release right here, then you have to, basically you're just breaking the flash right here on these holes. And then obviously you got to go through there and just poke the resin out. Now another good thing would be on these plates, it wouldn't hurt a bit, just take that free coat I showed you, that aerosol, and just spray these things down. These are pretty old plates. I don't know how much life I can get out of these. They still work. And then you're back the same thing. You just clean the flash off, clean the PVA off. It's sort of fun. And then to get the inside, I always run a Dremel through there. I'll start it like this. I'll pop the center out, and then I'll just take a Dremel and I'll go through the center there. Put the Dremel on a Variac so it slows it down. It's a carbide bit, you know, it goes through there, cleans it out. The outside of the bell crank, you can just put the old file on it. The less you can stay away from, the more you can stay away from a belt sander, the better off, because this stuff gets in the air and you really need a downdraft table. or a vacuum going. But you saw that cleaned up really quick. You can peel the flash off. That's about all there is to that. Now, obviously, I put brass tube in there, and I'll run the cable through here and I'll bush it. So on some of these, I'm going to make up a post. I'll show you. Sometimes when I make these videos, I sort of take it for granted that everybody has seen some of this stuff or understands it, so I don't always explain it as well as I should. This is my little kit here. The center post was a piece of music wire, and I sometimes had to lap the bell crank out, clean out some resin or whatever, and I'd re-oil that bearing. I'd put a drop of oil in there. Now if I had a really tight fit, sometimes I'd put this music wire in a drill press, and then I'd actually spin it and I'd lap it in. Now the thing is, with music wire, it'll vary within it like half a thousandths, and believe it or not, there's a sweet spot sometimes on this rod to where it spins a little bit freer than others. So that's what you're looking for. You're looking for a really, really good spin. Now, before, when I made these things, I made this little button that went over the top. And one of the things, if you ever assemble a bell crank and you want to secure everything, you can use JB Weld, but if you use solder to solder this, basically what you want to do is solder this first, clean the whole thing with baking soda and water, and then assemble it, oil it. And then what I was doing after that, to secure it from the other side, which will be different now, because I used to take this oil-light bushing here and I'd just cut it off and it'd be flush, but I decided to keep it on there. It gives it more stability. So I think what I'll do is I'll peel some of this resin away, and then I'll make a dowel run washer that goes over that bearing, that goes past it a little bit, and then this ferrule slides over the top. It's a friction fit. And what was always nice is you could actually put a little JB Weld, around there, and so that way you didn't have a solder joint. So basically this would be soldered or JB Weld. The bell crank goes on, a dowel run washer, and then this. Now, Billy Werwich told me after ungodly amount of flights, he said that this would start to wear a little bit down here. So that's why I came in with a bearing surface here between the bell crank and this out of dowel run. And then of course the eyelets here were brass tube, and then I'd put this brass tube over this wire, which was, I don't know if I have any here, but anyway, I'd take a brass tube that would fit over this wire fairly tight, and then I'd form a loop, so this tube went inside of another tube right here, and that formed the lead out attachment. Now the thinking is, on this one I'm working on, is take the the fork, okay, what will happen is, if you can imagine this lead-out wire, this lead-out wire will be wrapped around a button. So there'll be a machined brass button. You know, let's just pretend this is machined bar stock. It'll have a groove in it like that. So this will all be one piece brass. The button, this will slip down over the button like that. You'll wrap this lead out over the button and crimp it. And then you'll take this assembly, you'll slide it in the fork, and then once you get it in the fork, then you'll take a pin, probably music wire or something, and you'll go down through it. So your bearing surface will be on this axis. So right now your bearing surface is like this. The new fork thing we're starting to go with is the bearing on the button on the post, and it's a lot more linear, or it's a lot better system. It's freer. One of the things that was brought to my attention, that on these electric airplanes, you got to have super really free controls. And the thinking was, back in the old days when you had a vibrating engine, it helped everything. It sort of canceled it out, or you didn't notice it. With the electrics are so smooth that a lot of binding and problems in your control system show up. So we're going to try to solve that with the button eventually. And then, of course, the center and all this bearing thing would probably stay the same. I also used to take this hole here, and I'd run a bushing down there. I machined these. So this was put in there, so there was an actual bushing in there if you wanted to put a push rod. But what most people did with this, once this was attached, they'd run a 440 tap through it for the ball link. And the ball links, that's a whole nother thing. So that's pretty much it in a nutshell on that. Sort of describe how I came up with that. Now, one of the things, if you're looking at this, you're probably thinking it doesn't look right. But that's the way to do it, according to the industry standard. So in effect, what you're doing here, that's an eyelet or a ferrule, and it's got an oblong hole in it. So you'd insert that. Show you how to crimp it here. So this tool said crimp, it's really a swage. This tool was made for these ferrules. 1/32, 3/64, and 1/16. And I think, if I remember right, I watched a video on TV. It was Balsa USA. Now, Balsa USA, almost all their airplanes are these World War I airplanes. So needless to say, they've got all these rigging and wires and stuff. I'm pretty sure Balsa USA sold this tool, or one just like it, with the cable and the ferrules. So that's something to keep in mind. Balsa USA. So I'd run this ferrule up there, and I'd lightly hold it like this, and then I'd pull the cable until I got the loop I wanted. Once you get the loop you want, then you squeeze it. And what happens on a proper crimp, and what makes this so unique or so good, is the ferrule shaped like this. So the cable goes through here, it loops, and it comes back here. Normally with the control line stuff, you'll see where they just take it and they dimple one side, or what's even worse, they'll take a brass tube and they'll just smash it like this. If you couldn't probably tell on this video, but basically what's happening with this ferrule on this cable, it's going like this. So it's almost like each cable that goes through that is being encapsulated 360 like this. And what is happening, if you probably cut it open, as this ferrule is being compressed on this cable, it's sinking into the cable. So it's going so tight that it's meshing into the weave of that cable. So with cable, they say operating strength is 1/5. So if you had a little widget and you supplied 20 pounds of force, and that's what your working poundage or whatever would be for your cable, that means the breaking point of the cable needs to be 100. So the rule of thumb is the working poundage of the cable is 1/5 of the breaking strength. So I've done a few of these. I'd put cables or loops on both ends and we'd take it to failure. I've never had one of these ferrules slip. The cable always breaks somewhere in here. If you pull it on a round post, it'll never break here either. Now if you have something like a screwdriver like this, it has a sharper radius on it, it might break here, but I've never had a ferrule slip on me with using this. So I'm not going to get into rule books and all the other stuff, but basically that's the industry standard for crimping cable. And you'll see cranes and stuff with cable that's this big, and they'll have huge hydraulic presses with ferrules that, you know, that actually crimp. You go to a job site where they have cranes, I guarantee you're not going to see them wrap the cable with copper wire and fold it back on itself. The only reason that was developed, or that was put in the AMA rule book, is it was accessible to everybody. And just anybody could actually make their own lines. This stuff here is not as much. Oh, I had a question here. I think you're going, okay. Yeah, Robert. What's your release wax of choice? Now, the trouble is my release wax of choice, let's see, where is it? It was a can. It was a really, it's a really thin wax. They don't, this place is out of business now, this AdTech. This was like a Seba product, I think, at one time, and they were repackaging it. It's called Mold Release Number 1. To give you an idea what this stuff looks like. Now, some of you guys out there might research it and let me know if you can find it. So as you watch, see how thin that is? The reason why I liked it is because it would actually go in the molds really well. So let's just say you wet your cloth out, and all these little details here, you didn't want any buildup. You just wipe the face of the mold, the sides, but then I'd fold it and I'd push it down in the cracks, and I was able to get down in the button like this and then through. So that's why I like this thin wax. Now fiber in the glass is GLAST. Sparky bought a little tin of wax, and it was in a little metal tub, and I forget what it was called, but it was a paste wax, but once you started rubbing with it, it became liquid. it's hard to explain. So Sparky thought, yeah, I don't know, I don't like it. I said, well, I'll tell you what, I like it, and I'd use it because it would work just like this. And he said, no, that's all right, I'll keep it. So he didn't want to sell it after all, but it was good wax. I mean, I talked him into keeping it. Now see, with this right here, the wax penetrates, and it's easy to work it in the small little crevices. And then also I do the pins. I got to remember to do the pins, and then of course got to remember to do the plastic. And one of the things I did on these plates too, I put a little bit of wax down in these holes. So that's the wax question. So this PVA says no rub in, just brush or spray. If you had a mold release that wasn't PVA, the free coat was a spray. If you're using PVA, you go with this wax that I just used, or that one fiberglass cells in the tin. Now the PVA can be brushed or sprayed. So if you take a real fine camel hair brush, and once you wax this thing here, clean it up, you could take that PVA and you could brush PVA in this mold. You don't have to actually spray the PVA. The only reason I like spraying the PVA is I can actually change the gun setting to where it spatters in there and it gives me a flat semi-gloss finish on the part. Some of the guys around here in Plainfield, they actually make a lot of parts, a couple of them, and he swears just brushing it. Just take it and brush the PVA. And one of the things you got to remember with PVA is you don't want to put it on too heavy. When you brush it, that's it. You take it and you spread it. You might come back the other way, but if you keep going back and forth, it starts to flash so quick and you have a hard time getting it finished. But yeah, PVA can either be brushed in, or you can take a little sponge and just dip it and then rub it on there. Let's see, the gear. This landing gear, it's set up for a control line stun airplane. So let's see, this gear, try to figure out what the rise of it. Let's see, I can't really tell. Without the wheels on it, you're looking at probably 3.5 inches. No, wait a minute. It's 4 inches. So from here to here, that's 4. So you take, I don't know, maybe a half off, put an axle in there. And then, you know, with wheels, you're looking at maybe 5.5, 6, 6.5, something like that, or whatever, depending on your wheel size. You can also vary the axle a little bit. Now, one of the things Bill Werwidge mentioned, I never thought of it, is for an axle, is take an aluminum roofing nail, and the aluminum roofing nails have a big head on them, and you drill a hole and you insert the nail through there, and then you epoxy it in place, so that way the wheel goes on, and then you put JB Weld in the washer or whatever you got to do, or wheel collar. So the aluminum roofing nails glued into here for a stunt plane would be perfect. Also, a question on this cable pole. Yes, I made up pole cables out of this stuff for a SIG Spacewalker's 3rd scale. So I came off my servo arms. It's been so long I can't remember how I terminated it with on the servo arm. I think it was a ball link, like we use on these things. So it came off of the servo arm, went back to the rudder, and the rudder was on a pole, and that worked out really good. So yeah, that's another use for that if you're in the RC. Here's a gear that I made. This thing here was for an RC plane. You can see the drastic rise. This thing here is, that's probably 7 inches. So that's for a little fun fly plane. And this plane up here, let's see if I can get my camera moved around. So the landing gear on this stunner is the same gear that you're looking at that I just molded. So that's a 60 size stunner, and then you can see underneath here where I made a plate to actually hold the gear on. It's got 3 bolts on it. I put a little extra wood on it so that way it sands flush with the bottom of the fuse. Sorry about the noise there. Alright, so anyway, that's the gear. So that's a little bit more of a detail explanation of what I'm doing here. I think eventually I'd like to actually edit these videos to keep it all together, so that way if you wanted to access any of the information it wouldn't be so hard to find it. So that's what I wanted to cover. I wanted to, for better or for worse, I wanted to see if this thing was going to come out all right. And probably what I'll do, this is 250, 300 degree resin, and it looks like it's pretty, cured now, but I can tell that if I put this in the oven at like 150 and get it up to 250, it's going to be perfect. So I'll probably clean it up, clean the flash off, and I'll set it in my oven for a couple hours and really cook it till it's really cured. And then these parts here, sometimes I'll post cure them at maybe 150, 180. And I'll have more videos on the fork thing that I try to do. So I think that's about it today. I just wanted to go over some of the stuff with the landing gear and explain the bell crank terminations and stuff like that. So yes. Yeah, Sparky says once I get this gear on the plane, he's probably looking at the one behind me. He said 70 ounces. I'm thinking 72. It's going to shine really good. Let's see. Yeah, Sparky, we talked the other day about getting together and putting these videos up split screen and doing different things. So if you guys have any ideas of what you'd like to see or whatever, let Sparky or me know, and we'll go through there and either ad lib, and could be like on a Saturday where we just get together and I lay a plane out on the bench and start working on it and explain stuff as I go along. So yeah, we'll do that. We'll get more videos. The stuff that I do, I don't know of anybody that really does any videos on control line composites. Now you get out there and there's a lot of people that do composites. It's like Easy Composites, and they'll show you how to make some generic parts. The videos I like to do on the composites are sort of tailored towards the stunt planes. So I try to take methods and processes and materials that are already out there in the mainstream, melt it all down, get rid of all the things we don't need, and then make some stuff that applies to the control line event. So believe it or not, when you start dealing with all these mold making materials and resins, and there's some cut and dried stuff but then there's some stuff that you have to tailor make or tweak to get them to be used on our stuff. A good example is the carbon fiber and landing gear and stuff like that. So sometimes you got to tweak some resins or whatever. So that's all I wanted to cover. Maybe I'll start slapping some paint on that airplane. I'm shooting for 70 ounces. Alrighty. So I didn't get timed out. So I'll just go ahead and say it. Fair winds, tight lines. I'll see you later.